Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. Hey, what a joy to have with us today Pastor J.D. Greear. He's the lead pastor at the Summit Church in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. Perhaps you've picked up a couple of his books and read them. He's the author of Jesus Continued, Why the Spirit Inside You is Better Than Jesus Beside You. Pretty interesting. Stop Asking Jesus Into Your Heart, How to Know That For Sure You Are Saved. And we want to talk to him about his latest book, and I think he's hit a really good nerve with this. It's called Gaining by Losing, Why the Future Belongs to Churches That Sin. So, Pastor J.D., good to see you, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me on, Barry.
Yeah, good to see you. I think you've really touched a nerve. First of all, what provoked you to go down this road?
You know, I think basically it was a reflection on just really what Jesus promised. Whenever Jesus talked about the greatness of the church or the expanse of the gospel in the world, he never talked about it in terms of one church just growing really large or even one kind of anointed individual that gathers a larger and larger audience around him. You know, one of his most famous promises, John 14:12, he said, "Greater works than I've done, you will do." On the face of it, that's kind of an absurd promise. I mean, who could ever suppose they'll do a greater work than Jesus? You know, who could preach a better sermon, pray with greater insight, or anything? Greater works are not a reference to a greater work that we'll do in comparison to Jesus, but the extent of Spirit-filled works when all of God's people have been filled with the Spirit and are taking the power of the gospel into the community. And so realizing that if our church wanted to realize and accomplish these greater works that Jesus was talking about, it wasn't going to be by us continuing to focus on our seating capacity. It was going to be by focusing on our sending capacity, raising up people in the power of the Spirit to carry the gospel and his power into the community.
You know, in light of all the things that are happening in the culture, Pastor, one of the comments that came out was, boy, the American church has done a great job evangelizing, gets a D- in discipleship. Would you agree with that?
Oh, no, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, if discipling was, if discipling took root again in the Christian church, then all these things would begin to take care of themselves. Let me tell you something I discovered in the writing of this book that would really reinforce that. The amount of people checking none on religious affiliation in our country, I'm sure you've talked about this in your show, rises every year at an astounding rate. And the thing about somebody that considers himself to be without religious affiliation means that they're not just going to migrate their way into churches the way that people used to. Used to be people at Christmas and Easter, if they had a tragedy or a wedding or a funeral. A friend of mine who lives outside of London told me that 70% of British people in a survey over there said that they never anticipated going into a church really for any reason. 70%. It's not that they are like mad at the church. It's just that they just are so out of that, you know, he says if there's a national tragedy, they're not going to go. If they're lonely, they're not going to go. It's just not really on their radar screen. He said, so the idea that we're just going to improve the church product enough through better sermons, funnier sermons, better guest services, better music. He said, what you're going to do is you're going to start competing for a larger piece of a rapidly shrinking pie in your country. And I think he's exactly right. I think what you'll see in the future are fewer and flashier mega churches competing for a larger piece of a shrinking pie. But those of us who want to reach the rest of the community, who want to grow the pie, are going to have to focus on raising up people and sending them out, not just having awesome church services that attract everybody to them.
Boy, this provokes a lot of questions. But let me go back to your experience, why you came to this understanding and perhaps revelation in your own heart, because it would be quite a pastoral shift to go from a large crowd to getting rid of it. So how did you struggle with that? How did you process that?
Well, just full disclosure, so everybody knows what we're talking about. I mean, the church I pastor is still, it would be a very large church. You know, it's got several thousand on the weekend that attend every weekend. So I'm not against large churches, and I'm not against building big crowds. I mean, Jesus and the apostles did that. But for me, what happened? There was this one really significant moment that kind of captures it. I was praying one afternoon, Perry, for our city. And I was praying that God would send an awakening, a revival into our city like nothing our city had ever seen, the kind of thing that you would write about in history books 100 years from now. And in the middle of that prayer, it was one of those times when the Holy Spirit spoke, not audibly, but in something that was as clear as if it were audible. He said, "Okay, what if I say yes and I answer that prayer?" and I sent an awakening to Raleigh-Durham, but what if I don't use your church, the Summit Church? What if I don't use you to lead it? What if your church never grows? What if your friends' churches down the road, what if they're the ones that grow and get all the attention? Do you still want me to pour out my power? And I know the answer. I knew what it was supposed to be. I was supposed to be like, oh, yes, Lord, you must increase and I must decrease. But that wasn't my real answer. My real answer was no, I'm not okay with that. I want our church to grow. And I realized the Holy Spirit revealed in that moment that all those times I've been saying, thy kingdom come, what I really meant was my kingdom come. And that led to just some deep repentance where I went back to our congregation and I told them, I said, I think I've led you wrongly. We've been focusing on growing a great big church. Our focus needs to be on reaching our community with the gospel and getting the gospel into places in the world where the gospel, there are no churches. And if that means that God's going to give us a big church in the process, so be it. But it might mean that he's going to take a lot of our most cherished resources and a lot of our best leaders, and he's going to send them out to plant other churches in these places. This year, we sent 153 of our members to go out and plant three different church plants we were working on. These are members that are big givers, and they led ministries, musicians, friends. But we know that's how God works, is he takes the seed of the harvest and he scatters it, and that's how he really multiplies it.
That's quite an admission.
This is not public, right? This is just me and you talking. That's why it's a safe place.
Well, it's refreshing. It's refreshing because I think the model is what you were struggling with. The model was, me and my church and our facility, So, all right, so you've sent out these people, and that was the next questioning I wanted to go down was, are you talking church planting? Are you talking parachurch ministries? What are you talking when you send somebody out?
Yes, to all of the above, but mainly I'm talking about church planting. We think the primary strategy that Jesus had or the apostles had for completing the Great Commission is to go to strategic cities and plant churches. So the 150 some that I just mentioned, they all went into 2 domestic plants as well as several that we've got going overseas. Now, church planting overseas obviously looks different than it does here because you don't send a group of Americans to camp out in the Sudan and call that a church plant. They're more there as a team. And so what we're looking at is raising up people to send them out to plant churches in strategic cities in the United States where there are not churches. For us, also major college towns in the Southeast, and then also places around the world where it's just very, very few evangelical Christians. But not only sending out, and this is the key, not only sending out seminary trained pastors. In fact, very few of who we send out are seminary trained pastors, just usually 1 per team, but just ordinary business people who are going to say, all right, how can my career be leveraged for the purposes of the Great Commission? We interview all of our college seniors when they graduate, and we say, would you allow us to help you figure out where the best place is for you to pursue your career? Why not let the kingdom of God be the largest influence in where you're going to do what you do? The line we use is, whatever you do it well to the glory of God, but then do it somewhere strategic for the mission of God. Let the mission of God be the largest factor in where you choose to put your roots down and plant your life. So most of those 150 were dentists or real estate or lawyer kind of people who were just teachers who were just saying, I'll pursue my career here in this city so that I can help be a part of a church plant there.
Wow. All right, let me take a break. I want to come back to the ordinary person being sent out. I mean, it's kind of a mixed bag. I don't know if you're getting any pushback on that. Are we putting people in pastoral positions that aren't properly trained? I want you to respond to that. We'll be right back with Pastor J.D. Greear. By the way, this book, pastors, get a copy of this book, Gaining by Losing. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Welcome back, and our special guest is Pastor J.D. Greear. He's authored this book called Gaining by Losing, Why the Future Belongs to Churches That Send. There's a picture of it there on the screen for those watching on the Dove TV, put out by Zondervan. So check it out at Evangel or Christian Discount Books in Jacksonville or Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I think you're going to find this to be a tremendous resource. You may want to buy this book and read it and then give it to your pastor. Pastor Greear, before we went into the break, we talked briefly about the qualifying of somebody that you would send out to be a pastor. How do you do that? How do you regulate that?
Well, yeah, to serve in a pastoral position, in a leadership position, we certainly want to go, we don't want to shortcut anything there. So what we do is we bring onto our staff every year 4 what we call residents, who we give them, we pay their salary for a year, and their only assignment really is to prepare for their church plan. And we give them an open headhunting license to be able to recruit anybody from our church that they want to take with them to go. And so that's what they do for a year, and they typically build teams of anywhere between 25 and sometimes as high as 50 people of members from our church. A lot of those are going to be college graduates. We have an extraordinary amount of college students that are a part of our church, and so they'll recruit a lot of them to say, hey, you got to pursue your career somewhere. Why not pursue it, here and plant your life in the city where we're going to plant a church? But a lot of them are retirees. Some of them are young families. It's amazing how many people are anxious to think, how can my career be used as a part of the mission of God? And then a lot of times, it's, overseas, the greatest opportunities for mission overseas are not in people like me who are professional Christians and seminary trained. The greatest opportunities are for ordinary business people who are able to go into what we call the 1040 window, which is the most unreached part of the world, where North Africa and China and those places are able to take their careers and carry the gospel with them as they go and make disciples over there. I have so many examples I've seen in our church of people who, it doesn't cost our church a dime because their salary is paid by their business, but they're able to go over there and rub shoulders with business people that we couldn't get close to no matter how many short-term mission trips we took. And they're able to my dad was one of those. He never been in ministry. He's just a businessman. His company, when he retired, we hired him as a consultant to go over to a place in the 1040 window where he was able to lead a couple of businessmen to Christ over there. And I think that's the future of the Great Commission. So yeah, we've got some apostolic kind of figures, which by that I mean, full-time pastors. But then we got a lot of people who are just ordinary disciple makers. Ordinary, I say that in quotes, but they're spirit-filled people. What we've got to recover, Perry, is the fact that in the New Testament, the focus, the tip of the gospel spear is not pastoral figures like me. The tip of the gospel spear is ordinary people carrying the gospel with them everywhere they go.
What a great model. Do you think we're in potential revival mode in America?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that's happening, hold on a second, I got a lot of kids coming in here. One of the things that's happening in America is you're seeing, I think, this revival among the laity, because I think the sort of what's happening with the darkness of the disappearance of this cultural Christian middle. It used to be that no matter, you had all these people who said, yeah, I'm a Christian, I go to church on Christmas and Easter, and that was the majority of our country. Well, that middle part is disappearing, and it's kind of like, the light is becoming lighter and the dark is becoming darker. And I think it's forcing a lot of people really to ask the question. And I think that always brings revival. I mean, nobody wants darkness to come on our land, but historically, when that happens, it forces God's people to choose where they're gonna stand. I was watching with millions of Americans. I was watching the ESPN Awards the other night. When they gave the award for courage to Bruce Jenner, and basically his speech is essentially him saying, we got to get beyond this being right or wrong. And I watched as the whole room full of people stood to their feet and applauded. And I remember thinking, what's it going to be like to stand with courage on what God's word says in a forum like that? It's going to take courage, and it's going to force us to say, what do I really believe? And do I trust the power of the Spirit of God enough in me that I'm going to stand with Him, even if I have to stand against the world?
I think the faith community in America is ready to make that stand. I mean, you know the problem. You're a pastor. You see those who want you to go down that road, those who don't. But as you sending these people out into the culture, and you're dealing with the whole issue of millennials, whether or not they want to come to a building or not go to a building. I mean, you know the drill. But now we're being forced to defend our faith and our theology at the water cooler. We've never had to do that before.
Yeah, well, again, I'm not excited about the days that are ahead of us in one sense, because nobody should that. But I do know that whenever these kind of things happen, it's like it forces people to really choose who they stand with. You know, when you've got this kind of everybody's a Christian and we all go to church, it's just a lot of people that never have to actually make the choice. And so what I'm seeing with like college students, probably, it's probably 2,000 college students a weekend at our church, is that they're having to choose. And it's making, to use what I said a moment ago, the light is becoming lighter and the light is becoming more glorious and the darkness is becoming darker. And I think the positive effect of that is we're going to see more and more Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego kinds of people who say, I stand with Jesus. And that brings revival, because God can pour more power out on one person who is totally committed to him than he can on 100 who are half committed or lukewarm in their relationship to him.
What would you say to a pastor who's beginning to sense what you've already experienced, and that is, wait a minute, I'm spending too much time trying to fill the building, and I need to be sending people. What would you say to the one that's starting to think about that?
Well, the first thing is to dive deeply into the promises of Jesus. I mean, Jesus promised that this is how the church is going to grow. Jesus promised that the Holy Spirit could do more when ordinary people are raised up and released than when we're just gathering sheep and preaching to them and counting them. I know that somebody says, well, you don't know my people. Yeah, I get that. But Jesus, one of the most astounding promises he made about the Holy Spirit is he said that the greatest prophet, according to Jesus, to ever walk the face of the earth was John the Baptist. You'll never get a greater preacher than John the Baptist, he said. But Luke 7:28, truly, truly, I tell you, the one who is least in my kingdom is greater than John the Baptist, which means that if one of your listeners right now feels like, I feel like I'm the least in the kingdom of heaven. Who knows? Maybe they're right. Maybe God in heaven is shaking his head going, yep, you've got the least talent. You've got the least potential. That person has more potential and power in ministry than John the Baptist, because they have something John didn't have, which is the Holy Spirit permanently fused to their souls. And what that means is it's no longer about their ability in ministry. It's about their availability to the Spirit. So review the promises of Jesus. Here's a second thing. Devote yourself to discipleship and raising up of leaders. Leaders don't just appear magically. They come as a result of discipling, which is just opening your life to bring people along with you, trying to empower others in ministry, getting behind them, not just using them as cogs in your machine as volunteers, but raising up leaders. Big difference in volunteers and leaders. Leaders you're entrusting things to and getting them to realize what the Spirit of God has put inside them and helping them pursue their dreams. And then, the third thing is to check your heart and say, God, am I really in this for your kingdom? And what you'll find is that as you do those things, sending is the natural fruit of a gospel-rich culture. The deeper you go in the gospel, the more sending will become just something that you don't really think about. It's like a fruit it's like a rose on a rose bush. It just comes because the bush is healthy.
Mm. Wow, well said. Do you think we are heading to some kind of a clash between, as the Christianity continues to grow, we also know the growth of the Islamic faith, and you know the numbers, you probably have seen them. Some will say the Islamic faith is growing more than Christianity. I don't know, I've seen the other number, but whatever the case is, let's say they grow to a number of almost being equal. The argument is, who's God's the one true God? What do we do with this one?
Yeah, actually my ministry began, I lived in a Muslim country for a number of years, and that's very deeply passionate. It's deeply meaningful to me. In fact, the very first book I wrote was called Breaking the Islam Code, about how to engage Muslims with the gospel. Our church continues to focus a lot of its efforts on reaching Muslims, whether they're ones locally or ones to live around the world. And I often tell our church, I was like, God promised that before history ended, he would bring massive groups of people from every tribe and tongue to worship him. And that includes the people groups that are now Muslim. history cannot end until that happens. I know how it's going to end. So I told our church, we're going to be like that proverbial woodpecker that's just, tapping away at the telephone pole, not making really any difference, when all of a sudden lightning strikes the telephone pole, splits it in two, and that little woodpecker kind of, backs up a little bit, looks at the telephone pole, then goes and gets all of his friends and brings it back and says, there she is, boys, look at what I did. Obviously he didn't do anything, but he was just there when the lightning struck. And those of us who know what God says about the future of history, my work among Muslims is much the same way. I feel like sometimes we're just tapping away and we don't feel like we're making that much difference. But when that lightning bolt of God's power, God's saving, redeeming power strikes the Muslim world, when it happens, I'm going to kind of back up a little bit dazed, and I'm going to say, I knew it was coming, and I'm glad I was here when it happened. I think that if you want to be on the most cutting edge, devote yourself to thinking about the places where it's the hardest for people to reach. Again, that was why I wrote that book, just because I wanted to help our congregation engage Muslims everywhere, because God's doing something in the Muslim world. There's a hunger for God. He's visiting them with dreams and visions, and it's amazing. So, get on it.
Yeah, we're hearing the stories too. Again, let me just say to our viewers and listeners, get a copy of this book. This is an incredible resource. Gaining by Losing: Why the Future Belongs to Churches That Send, by J.D. Greear. There it is. They're put out by Zondervan. Pastor Greear, I want to come back to when you went before your congregation and said, I've misled you. How'd they take that?
They kind of knew all along. On this issue, I feel like ordinary people are probably farther ahead than us professional pastors are, because they know the church doesn't exist for the pastor. They know that the church exists for Jesus, and we really ought to be focused more on Jesus' kingdom than ours. So when I acknowledge that to them, we've been doing a lot of good things. We've seen a lot of people saved, and people were, the power of God was certainly moving in our church. But the people just kind of said, it wasn't like, we knew all along that you were all into you and not in, but they said, this is what we ought to be. And if we've got to give things away, and if we've got to open our doors, like I said a minute ago, sending is the result of a gospel-saturated culture. And what changed our church and what changed me was just the beauty of the gospel, realizing how far Jesus had reached when he saved us, how much he gave up when he died to redeem us. And those of us who believe the gospel and receive that gospel, you can't help but become like the gospel. 1 John 4:19, we love others because he first loved us. Awareness of the depth of God's love for us is what produces love for God and for others in us. So it wasn't as shocking as you might think. They kind of nodded their heads and said, of course, that's the direction we should go.
Wow. You're an inspiration. Thank you for doing this. I don't know, what's next? What do you feel God tugging on you next?
Well, I wanted to get Gaining by Losing out just because I wanted to say, this is how we as believers, individual Christians and church leaders need to think about their lives. The book is written around like 10, what we call plumb lines, which are basically a way to think about a philosophy of ministry for your church, for your parachurch organization, or just for your life. Now that that's behind me, I'm really wanting to focus my attention on, like I told you, Raleigh-Durham is filled with college students. What does it look like to express the gospel to them in ways that overcome the obstacles of doubt and unbelief? And so, I don't know, that's where I feel the Holy Spirit lead me next, and I'm plunging into an idea for a book that I think Zonderman's already agreed to publish, that hopefully will engage the next generation with the gospel in a way that penetrates the heart. So you can pray for me in that.
You bet, we will. Thank you, my friend. Thanks for your time. I know it's tight, and we value greatly the opportunity to talk to you, and look forward to connecting again, because I think you've touched a real nerve with all of this.
Thank you so much. I'm honored that you have me on.
All right, God bless you. All right, we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Welcome welcome back, and delighted to have back with us today Debbie Chaves. She's the Executive Director of the Colorado Family Action CFA Foundation. Recently, she was one of the speakers there at the Breaking the Silence conference hosted by the Church for All Nations. And today we want to talk to her about how you may not be aware that some of the things you're involved in financially could actually be funding Planned Parenthood. Real eye-opener. Hi, Debbie. Good to see you. How you doing?
Hi, Perry. Thank you so much for having me.
First of all, your response to these videotapes that's been released over the last couple of weeks.
Well, quite frankly, this is a modern-day Holocaust. It's absolutely shocking, and it's horrifying to see the images and to even hear that dialogue.
Yeah, it's and then of course the other one that came out yesterday. So how would churches possibly not know that their support in various organizations could be going to Planned Parenthood?
What we see with a lot of retirement plans, with a lot of investment plans, is we have people that may not be directly funding, but it's an indirect way of funding an organization that supports Planned Parenthood. And we see that with multiple cell phone organizations that might have a third way to fund through the money that you're giving to that cell phone company.
So what would a church do if they have an investment plan for employees? What should they do?
You know, I would definitely tell them to have their investment operator check and see where those donations are going, where those investments are, and find out if those connections are connected to another party that is directly funding from that third party, or if they have a party actually in their investment portfolio that might be funding.
Well, this would hold true for individuals as well, wouldn't it?
Absolutely would. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to speak from the pulpit about being good stewards. And as good stewards, we want to make sure we know where our money is going. And we've got some great resources out there. One of the new ones that popped up in the last couple of years is secondvote.com. And I'm not sure if you've heard about Second Vote, but they do a great job of profiling companies for us. Okay.
Now, since this whole videotape on Planned Parenthood has been released, a couple of things have come out of that. A lot of large companies who've been named on their website are saying, no, we've never supported them. On the other hand, it's caused a lot of people to say, who am I invested in, and are they giving money to Planned Parenthood? Some of these group investment packages, can you request to get out of them? Can someone say, no, I don't want to be there?
You know, I'm not a financial analyst, so I don't really know the path it's going to take to get out of there, but I certainly think we need to start having that dialogue. And we need to make those requests to our financial advisors, because when the pressure comes on and we say we no longer want our money to go there, I think that's when there's going to be a statement made. We see that Planned Parenthood pulled down their donor list off of their website, and they had those big donors there for a reason. It was their claim to fame, and now all of a sudden they don't want to be on the website. So this is a great time for us to all take a second look at where our money is going.
Do you think, or have you heard any more pastors that may be literally speaking out on this now and say, hey, look, individuals and groups, see where your money's invested? I mean, do you think that will happen from the pulpit?
I do think that will happen. In fact, this week I just spoke with Jack Hibbs, who's out of Chino Hills, California, and he came out to Colorado to speak to a bunch of Family Policy Council leaders to help them understand what it looks like to ignite these pastors to not just empower their churches, but to empower their people in the pews. Of where's your stewardship going? What are you involved in? Where is your money being planted? And are you really planting good seeds out there in society?
Do you think, I know there is some move in Congress. I think we're all saddened that they're going to go into the summer recess and they didn't move this forward faster. But do you think when they return, we may see a genuine effort to defund Planned Parenthood?
I think we will. It looks like we might see that on Monday. The U.S. Senate is looking at actually addressing that issue on Monday to see if they can push that bill forward. That is 1881, Senate Bill 1881. All
right. Do you know the procedure? I mean, it's a bill that will come through the Senate and the House and probably go to the president and get vetoed. But at the end of the day, this is a funding issue. Isn't that a House of Representative control? I mean, they control the purse strings.
Well, they do. And I think this is where phone calls right now make a difference. In fact, I would encourage people to call their senator today, because if that pressure comes on in the Senate so hard that we want this defunded and that Senate Bill 1881 needs to be addressed immediately, I think that we can put the pressure on and get this done.
That's wonderful. Well, I guess what I'm hearing you say, though, is that we ought to use this as an opportunity to look at all of the things that we may be invested in, whether it's an individual or group, certainly church retirement plans or whatever they may have in that area, just to see if those dollars go to a company and that would be funding Planned Parenthood. And I would assume that whoever their investment counselor is, that they could figure that out. I'm assuming. I'm not a financial advisor, you know.
Well, and that's the best option to go with. And right now, like I said, secondvote.com is a great place to start. What they do is they actually look at companies, they rate them on how well they support or oppose the issue of life, the issue of marriage, religious freedom, the environment. And they might have a company that they profiled and they find out that company is neutral. They might have a company that they say this company doesn't directly fund, but they indirectly fund, and they will paint out the path of that indirect funding. And it's a great place to start and have the tool then to figure out where your money's going. They also profile those great companies that support things like pregnancy centers.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Debbie, thank you. And again, your website is churchforallnations.com, right? Okay, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Welcome back. Well, it has been a long time since we've talked to our next guest, pastor, attorney, Dr. Scott Lively's with us, and I understand he's coming to Southern Oregon to do some speaking as well, but we want to talk to him today about the recent Supreme Court decision to legalize same-sex marriages. Scott, good to see you. Gee, you look wiser and grayer.
More grayer than wiser, I think. Yeah.
Good to see you. How you doing?
You too, brother. I'm doing very well. God has blessed me great. And my wife and I are on a summer speaking tour right now. We're in Riverside, California today. We're going to hit the road again today and start heading your direction.
All right. So when and where are you going to be speaking up here?
I'll be speaking on the 3rd at the Talent Community Hall at 6:30. And everyone's invited and welcome to come out to that. We're going to be dealing with how Christians can cope with all of the incredible, dramatic, disturbing changes that are happening in America. And I'm able to come at that topic both as a pastor and as an attorney and a missionary who runs an inner-city mission in Springfield, Massachusetts. Okay,
by the way, Scott's website is defendthefamily.com, defendthefamily.com. All right, Scott, we all are on tilt now what the Supreme Court has done with the same-sex marriage decision, and yet laws are supposed to come through the legislature, not through the Supreme Court. This opens up a lot of questions. The first one I would have for you is there any possibility of overturning this?
Well, we had an opportunity to ask the court to reconsider the case, and we pressed very hard. I was part of a group of people that pressed very hard to get the of the 4 different states that were parties in the Obergefell case to file that motion. They refused to do it, and never went with them. Frankly, this is now the so-called law of the land, but of course no law is valid if it violates the law above the law, and Christians have no obligation to honor any law that goes against the Bible.
All right, so how are we supposed to respond to this? And I'm saying we, the faith community, in the sense that it's kind of interesting to me. Here we are a month or so on the other side of the decision, and the shock seems to be over. We've kind of just absorbed it and moved on.
Well, we've been doing that, unfortunately, for a very long time as Christians. This downward slide really began back in 1947 when Justice Hugo Black wrote the majority opinion in Everson versus Board of Education that declared separation of church and state to be a constitutional law principle, and essentially took God off the throne here in America and replaced him with themselves. It's the secular humanist Supreme Court of the United States. And ever since then, we have been in steady decline. Black also wrote the majority, Torcaso v. Watkins in '61, that said that atheism is a religion that has to be treated equally with belief in God, effectively legally empowering every militant atheist in America to attack Christianity in public life. And of course, they did that immediately. They took down out prayer out of the public schools in '63, and the dismantling of Christian culture has continued since that time. And the church has really accepted and gone along to a very large extent, acquiesced every single step of the dismantling of Christianity. And where radical militant homosexuals and atheists have taken control of our country, and the punishment of believers.
So what we're looking at here is, the bottom line is religious freedom. Everybody's now concerned about it. Thankfully, they're waking up to it. But is there anything we can do?
Well, I don't actually believe in religious freedom the way that the term is used. I know that when you use it, and when most people use it, you Christianity. We're not talking about freedom for Islam and freedom for Buddhism and Hinduism as if they're equal with God. The #1 commandment is, "You shall have no other gods before me." And when we forget that, and we start accepting this concept of religious pluralism, and we say that Jesus Christ is really no higher in authority in America than Buddha or Muhammad or even Satan, that's when we have really dropped the ball, and we have brought disfavor from God on us. You know, ask the question, how is it that we could go 42 years with a large army of pro-life? I heard this news about the Planned Parenthood butchery that's going on. How could we go 42 years with this army of activists doing everything to stop the killing of unborn babies, and barely scratch the paint on the bumper of the pro-abort juggernaut of death? If even one man, just one man, had the favor of God with the flimsiest of plans, he could have stopped that. He could have stopped the gay agenda in very short order. So what it means, we do not have the favor of God. And why not? Because we are not asserting the truth, that he is sovereign, that he is in control of America, he is the king. Think of all the patriots at the Revolutionary War who died on the battlefield with the cry, "No king but Jesus," on their lips. You know, we have devalued that blood, and of all the patriots since then, that battlefields believing that American values meant godliness and morality, not sexual perversion and killing. And that's the real, what we have to come to grips with. We have to begin asserting the fundamental truth, their so-called God, and that he will do that. There's nothing, I don't think, that's going to stop this death spiral.
Okay, we're having a little bit of a technical difficulty. If you can lean forward just a little bit, I think that will help. Let me ask you this, Scott. What do you want? What would you like to see churches do?
Well, we need to be exercising really the last right that we have, which is the First Amendment. And that's being chipped away very rapidly. You see what's happened with the folks, you know, the bakers and the cake makers and the printers and all these that are whose First Amendment rights are just being trampled. People being fired. You know, the CEO of Mozilla being ousted from his position because he made a contribution to the Prop 8 campaign. You know, the First Amendment is being rapidly chipped away, but it's still considered to be a central American value. We need to exercise that right assert the truth of God, speak the plain truth of the Bible without apology, and be willing to take the persecution that comes from that. The days in which Christians could keep their heads in the sand and try to stay out of the way and think that they're going to be able to live their lives, outside the scope of culture war and spiritual warfare, those days are gone. And that, I think, is the best thing that happened as a result of the gay marriage ruling. Across America have waked up and said, wait, what just happened here? And realized that it's a different America today than it was a month ago. And that, I think, is a good thing if the remnant rises to the challenge and begins asserting the truth of God.
All right, there's two things that have happened, Scott, within the last month and a half that probably were given to us as wake-up calls to the American church to reassert itself back into the culture. And you know that, you're an attorney, this myth of separation of church and state. But the two core things that have popped up was the Supreme Court decision legalizing same-sex marriage, and now these tapes, these videotapes showing Planned Parenthood dismembering babies and selling their body parts. The two things that would force the church to take a position, and I don't know if we are. I don't know if we see this as an opportunity, and I don't mean this on a militant basis, but my stars at least stand up and declare what the scriptures say about both.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing the dividing of the sheep and the goats. I mean, what more evidence would any pastor need than what he has before him right now? So anyone at this point who is staying silent on these issues is doing so intentionally and with full knowledge that they're capitulating to the reign of evil over America. We really are now under occupation, like the French. We're being occupied by cultural Marxists who are in power, and really they're in the consolidation phase right now. Years ago I laid out a stage scale that I've talked about all over the world. It begins with tolerance, then goes to acceptance of homosexuality, then celebration, then forced participation in gay culture, and then the fifth and final stage is punishment of all dissenters. Well, what the U.S. Supreme Court has done is established Phase 4 as the law of the land. We are now all, collectively, the entire country, being forced to participate in gay culture, and the consolidation of that, the implementation of that is proceeding right before our eyes. At the same time, they're starting to move toward step 5, which is punishment of all dissenters, and we're seeing people like the Kleins in Oregon and others, Marys in the coal mine. So am I. I'm being sued for crimes against humanity in federal Springfield, Massachusetts, for preaching against homosexuality in Uganda. Those of us who are facing these things we're just the tip of the spear. We're ahead of the curve, but it's coming to everyone. No one's going to be able to stay out of it. The folks that are pushing this, they want to come after every Christian. They hate Christianity. They want to punish. They're going to aggressively pursue every person, and even if just ask them the question, what do you think about gay marriage? Now, what are you going to do, Christian? Are you going to stand with the truth of God and assert the truth of the Bible, even if that means you might get fired? Or are you going to deny Christ, deny what he's taught us? Right? Everyone's going to have to face that. So we need to prepare for this. We need to realize there's nothing to fear about it because Jesus has us in his hands. And if you're persecuted for righteousness' sake, you'll be blessed tenfold for the amount of pain that you suffer. So don't worry about it. I'm more blessed than I've ever been, and yet I'm being persecuted more than anybody else in America, I believe. Maybe a couple people could rival me on that, but that's just the way that it is. So let's wake up. And this is the point that I want to make when I come up and speak, is that we have a rich heritage as Christians in the work of missionaries. That being a missionary is the model for being a Christian American today. we no longer can take for granted that this is a Christian nation with a Christian culture. We're no longer a God-fearing society. We're now in hostile territory, so we need to shift into missionary mode. And we have tremendous heritage in that. We have many, many witnesses and examples to follow for centuries.
Okay, so you'll be up here on the 3rd. You'll be speaking at the Talent Community Hall at 6 o'clock, is that right?
6:30, yes, and I'd love to have resources, and we're going to talk about practical ways to be able to share your faith with the least amount of risk. We're going to be talking about where this is going, the kind of things you can expect as the unfolds and they start to sue people, how to protect your children from this, because they're going to go after the kids much stronger than they ever have. I mean, they're already doing it. But all of those things we're going to talk about. And when I speak, it's very interactive. So there's questions, and we're going to have a conversation about this. And I think everyone's going to be happy that they participated in that conversation.
Okay, that'll be on the 3rd, coming up next week. And let's see here, at the Talent Center, Community Center at 6:30. Scott, thank you. Your website is defendthefamily.com?
Yes, and also scottlively.net is my blog.
Lively.net. Hey, thanks. Good to see you. Okay, thank you.
Talk to you next.
Okay, sorry about that, folks. We had kind of a Skype thing situation there that was kind of deteriorating. So that'll be coming up on the 3rd, and they're in Talent at 6:30. Well, let me just say that the other thing that I just kind of want to remind you of is a couple things. First of all, don't forget to be listening to the Jerry Bilden Show a little bit later on. He'll be giving away some tickets to the upcoming Dove Fest, August 23rd, out at the amphitheater there in Central Point, the fairgrounds. So be listening to that. I also want to say to you may want to get a copy, going back to this book, Gaining by Losing. It is a terrific book. And I think for churches that are coming to grips with, do we want to get bigger, or do we want to have more of an impact? You may want to check this out. It is put out by Zondervan. Gaining by Losing by Pastor J.D. Greear, and it is a tremendous resource. The other thing is, don't forget, every month in downtown Medford, there is a what we call an info picket. We did it yesterday, and it was really, really encouraging to see so many people come out. It is on the same block that Planned Parenthood is in the Medford area. And what was so good about it was very peaceful. The response to those driving by was very, very positive. And now, as more and more of these videos are going to continue to be released about Planned Parenthood and what they are really doing and what they are really all about, it's an opportunity for us to stand and make a statement on the defense of human life, and especially that of the unborn. And so the next time we announce this, which will be in a couple of weeks, to have one once a month, I'd like to see us at least double the amount of people down there. You say, well, what's this all really about? What it really is all about is just making a very positive statement that we don't want our tax dollars to go to an organization that is killing babies and then cutting them up and selling their parts. As gruesome as that is and sounds, that's exactly what's happening. So yesterday wasn't a one-time event. It was the beginning of a movement in Southern Oregon to continue to put the pressure on to defund Planned Parenthood. We need to do it. So we'll let you know, but mark that down. Come on out. It's a great experience. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, theDove.us.